My mother attempted to pressure me into marrying the daughter of her closest friend. Then she became enraged when my girlfriend and I ran off and got married secretly. Now, prepare yourself for a statement I never envisioned myself uttering. My mom has been orchestrating my wedding since I was very young, not in the way a mother might daydream about her child's special day. Nope, she had meticulously decided who I would wed and when and how, the most unbelievable aspect. She figured I didn't need to be informed until recently. I'm a 27-year-old, and up until around a month ago, I felt like I was living a pretty regular life. I have a job that's all right, a small but tight-knit group of friends, and a girlfriend, Sarah, whom I've been with for about 2 years. Sarah is incredible. She's nice, intelligent, hilarious, and frankly out of my reach. I've kept the relationship on the down low because let's just say my mom has always been a little overbearing. However, I was totally unprepared for what she sprung on me last month. It all began at a completely ordinary family dinner. My mom, my dad, and I were at the table, eating as we always did. Unexpectedly, my mom casually stated, "Oh, by the way, we should start planning the wedding soon." I nearly choked on my food. Initially, I figured she was kidding. Sarah and I hadn't even discussed getting married yet, so I laughed and asked, "What wedding?" Mom gave me a look like I was the one who was insane. "Your wedding, obviously," she declared in a totally casual tone. "You're not getting any younger, and Emma's family has been asking when we'll make things official." Emma, the name didn't even. I was trying to figure out what was going on, then it struck me. Emma is the daughter of my mother's closest friend. It's been over 10 years, maybe even longer, since I last saw her. Back when we were children, we were made to spend time together at family gatherings along with a lot of other kids, but we were never real friends. To be honest, I hardly remember what she looks like. I watched my mom, hoping she'd start laughing or say she was joking, but she didn't. She just continued eating like it was the most ordinary thing ever. "Are you serious?" I finally said. My mom looked up, bewildered. "Obviously, I'm serious. We've been arranging this since you were a kid. You won't find a better partner than Emma. Her family is esteemed. They are successful and she's a good person. Trust me. This is the best thing." I was completely speechless. Planning this since I was a child. What on earth does that mean? How could I not know about this? Turns out, when I was approximately 10 years old, my mother and her closest friend made some kind of agreement that their children would someday marry. According to my mom, it was a fantastic plan to combine our families. Emma's family has money, and my mom thought this marriage would ensure financial security for both families. Let me be blunt, I had no idea this was going on. No one asked me. Nobody told me. My entire life, my mother has been pushing me to be the ideal son. Get good grades, go to a prestigious college, get a good job. But I always assumed that was simply standard parental expectation. I had no idea she was preparing me to marry somebody I hardly know. The more she discussed this, the more unbelievable everything became. Everything had been mapped out beforehand. The location, everyone we'd invite, even the color palette, it was all set. She insisted Emma and I were fated to be with each other, and that it was finally time to continue our family's traditions. I simply sat there, completely shocked. My father didn't say a word during the entire discussion, which wasn't unexpected. He usually keeps quiet, just accepting whatever my mom suggests. But I couldn't just let this go. What if I don't want to marry Emma? I finally asked. My mom's expression shifted to one of anger. "Don't be self-centered," she stated. "This is more important than your own wants. It's about the family's honor." Over the next several days, my mom wouldn't stop mentioning it, making subtle remarks like, "Emma's parents are really happy about this," or "You'll appreciate me for this someday." Whenever I tried to express my reluctance, she unleashed every guilt trip she could think of. "You can't even fathom the sacrifices we've made for you," she would claim. "This is the very least you could do for us. You should realize that. Sarah will never be able to offer you the kind of security Emma can provide. Be realistic. You're going to wound Emma deeply. She's been anticipating this moment her entire life." That final statement really got to me. I began to question whether Emma had known about this plan from the beginning. Did she really want this to happen? Was I the terrible person for potentially ruining everything? Then, about a week later, my mom dropped another enormous surprise. She'd invited Emma and her family to dinner at our place so we could share the exciting news. The night of the dinner. I was utterly terrified. It felt like I was stepping into some kind of a setup. Sarah had absolutely no clue what was unfolding, and I didn't have any idea how to share it with her. She knew my mother was overbearing, but this was a whole different ballgame. When Emma and her family showed up, things were uncomfortable immediately. Emma seemed just as uneasy as I was. She was being civil but detached, like she was just going through the paces. Her parents, though, were positively glowing. It seemed as if they believed everything was already decided. Throughout dinner, Mom began discussing the future once more, vaguely referencing wedding dates and locations. I couldn't handle it any longer. I just came out with it. I told them I didn't think this was going to pan out. A heavy silence filled the room. Emma looked as though she had gotten a weight lifted off her, but her mother's expression dropped. My mom, though, she was enraged. She began to go off on a tirade about how unappreciative I was, how I was ruining everything she'd struggled for. She even implied that Sarah had manipulated me. And then, as though things couldn't get any worse, Sarah called. My cell phone was sitting on the table, and Mom saw her name flashing on the display. She seized my phone and answered it before I could do anything. "He's busy," she said icily, and then immediately ended the call. That evening, I finally understood that there was no way to reason with my mom. She didn't care at all about what I wanted. This was not about me. It was about her and this bizarre dream she had been nurturing for years. After everyone departed, I informed my father that I was finished. I wasn't going to be marrying Emma, and I also wasn't going to allow my mother to dictate my life any longer. He didn't react much, just gave a small nod and simply stated, "Do what you think is necessary." I passed the rest of the evening with Sarah, attempting to brainstorm our next steps. That was the precise moment I came to my decision. I was going to ask Sarah to marry me. If my mom was so desperate for a wedding, she was going to get one, but it wouldn't be the one that she had envisioned. I decided to keep it low-key. I picked a quiet moment at the park where we had our initial date. Sarah was absolutely ecstatic, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally relax. However, that feeling of calmness didn't remain for long. I was aware that I had to tell my mother, and I absolutely dreaded every minute before I did. When I finally shared the news, it unfolded just like you'd anticipate. My mom completely lost it. She claimed that I was being self-centered, that I was ruining everything she'd strived for, and that I was disrespecting the family. She labeled Sarah as scheming and even insinuated that Sarah was only with me for financial gain, which is comical because I'm not exactly wealthy, though it wasn't just rage. There was something more: apprehension, like she was terribly afraid of losing her grasp over me. She wrapped up the call with a warning. "You will regret this, I guarantee you will." I really should have taken that more seriously. Initially, it was minor issues. My mom stopped communicating with me entirely, which was truthfully a relief. But later, she began contacting other relatives. Family members, including my aunt, uncle, and even my cousins, all started claiming I was leaving the family and making a really bad choice. People I hadn't heard from in ages were texting and calling me, urging me to rethink things and remember all the things my mom had done for me. The situation then grew worse. Sarah started seeing odd events happening at her job. She's a school teacher, and her principal unexpectedly summoned her to the office to discuss some complaints from parents. These complaints were unclear and didn't make any sense. Things like, "She acts unprofessionally," or "She's not suitable to work with children." Sarah's taught for years and never experienced any problems, so this was completely unexpected. We began to understand the situation when one of her colleagues mentioned that the complaints had been anonymous, but the wording sounded suspiciously like something my mother would say. I directly questioned my mom about it, and she completely denied any involvement, but I didn't trust her for a second. At this point, Sarah and I had reached our limit. We made the decision to elope. We weren't interested in the chaos of a big wedding, and truly we just wanted to begin our new life together without my mom interfering. We arranged a quiet courthouse ceremony with only a couple of close friends present as witnesses. On the day of the ceremony, everything was ideal. For maybe 10 minutes, just as we were about to begin, my phone vibrated. It was a text from my cousin. "Your mom knows," it said. I had to flee. The implication of those words hadn't even registered before the courthouse doors swung open. In burst my mother, followed by Emma and her folks. It all seemed like a scene from a dreadful TV drama. My mom was shouting about how I was making the most colossal blunder of my life, about how Sarah was a relationship destroyer, and how I was destroying my future. Emma's mother was sobbing, pleading with me to change my mind. And Emma, she seemed just as terrified as I was. I had no clue what to do. A part of me wanted to shout back, demanding that my mom leave and never return. But another part of me, the side she'd been dominating throughout my life, froze. I felt like I was a child once more, terrified to challenge her. Then Sarah stepped in. She didn't raise her voice at all. She didn't shout. She simply and quietly stated, "We're here because we love each other, and nobody, not you, not anyone, is going to take that love from us." For the first time, I saw fear in my mother's eyes. Not anger, not manipulation. Fear. She understood she couldn't triumph. And then unexpectedly, Emma spoke up. She'd been silent the entire time, letting her and my moms do all the talking. But now she looked directly at me and stated, "I don't want this either. I've never desired this." The room fell silent. Even my mom paused mid-tirade. Emma turned to her mother and announced, "I've been seeing somebody for the past year and I'm not abandoning him for this. I'm sorry, but I'm finished." Emma, the individual my mom had presented as the ideal match, had secretly been experiencing something else. I recognized a kindred spirit in her. She seemed as stuck as I was. A strange feeling of unity washed over me for a second. It felt like we were both struggling to get out of the same terrible situation. Emma's mother began to cry even louder, and my own mom just stood there, completely speechless. She didn't utter a single sound. She just turned and left. You'd think that would have been the end of the ordeal, but it wasn't. My mom is not one to easily back down. In the following days, she went completely ballistic. She cut off my financial support. Not that I relied on her money, but it felt like a major insult. She informed the rest of the family that I had embarrassed her and ruined what we had. Some agreed with her, some didn't. It created a massive division in the family that I'm not sure will ever be resolved. As for Sarah and me, we went ahead with the courthouse wedding a week later, and it was everything I could have wanted. No conflict, no disruptions, just us and those who genuinely cared for us. Emma contacted me a few days after we got married to say she was sorry for her role in everything. She explained that she had finally told her boyfriend the full story of the arranged marriage, and they were trying to sort things out. I told her I didn't hold any of it against her. We were both victims of our parents' crazy need to control things. The final update. After that courthouse wedding, I really believed I had finally achieved some peace. My mother didn't appear or contact me to cause problems, and for just a little while I thought maybe she had just given up. She didn't get in touch. Following our wedding, a sense of impending trouble replaced any feelings of peace. A week passed, and then everything fell apart. Initially, I learned that she had been contacting every relative she knew, spreading a crazy story about how I had abandoned the family, and that Sarah was somehow controlling me. I received messages and phone calls from family members I hadn't heard from in ages, some supportive, others angry. Next, she went further. One afternoon, Sarah arrived home from work completely distraught. It seemed that someone had phoned her place of employment, claiming she was emotionally fragile and behaving unprofessionally with her students. The school treated the situation as serious enough to question her and launch an investigation. Sarah was devastated. She's an amazing educator and had always had stellar reviews throughout her entire professional life. Both Sarah and I knew who was to blame. I phoned my mother and demanded an explanation for her behavior. She didn't deny anything. She said, "I did what I had to do and someday you'll understand that I'm right." That instant, I lost it. For so long, I had allowed her to control me with her guilt and scheming. Always, I had been the good son, attempting to make her happy. I had always tried to keep the peace. But this was too much. Sarah and I agreed we couldn't just brush this aside. If my mother was capable of sinking this low, we had no idea what else she might do. Sarah proposed we re-examine the circumstances surrounding our arranged marriage. There was something about it. This whole situation never felt right to me. I couldn't understand why my mother was so fixated on this idea of me marrying Emma. It seemed like there was more at play than just keeping up a family tradition. So I started to investigate. I looked through old family history documents, financial records, everything I could find. Initially, it was just a shot in the dark, but then I uncovered something that completely changed everything. Hidden within a pile of old documents in my father's office, I discovered an agreement, a real signed contract between my mother and Emma's parents. It wasn't just a vague agreement like my mom had made it seem. It was a full-fledged financial deal. Emma's family was committed to paying my mother a significant sum of money if the marriage took place. In return, my mom pledged to make sure the wedding happened by any means possible. I gazed at the paper, my hands trembling. This wasn't about love, family history, or even family itself. This was about pure avarice. My mom had been attempting to sell me off as if it were a business deal. And the worst part, she didn't even think I merited being informed. Contract in hand, I confronted my dad first. I showed him the document and asked if he knew about it. He looked completely shocked. He admitted that he'd overheard my mom and Emma's parents discussing securing the future. However, he had no idea it was this serious. He pleaded with me not to make it public, claiming it would destroy the family. But I just couldn't let it go. My mother had already tried to damage Sarah's career. She had already turned a good part of my family against me. She needed to be made to answer for her actions. So I decided to gather the family. I asked everyone to attend, my relatives, including Emma's parents. My mother was present, looking self-satisfied, probably believing I'd come to beg for forgiveness. She didn't know what was about to happen. Once everyone was settled, I took out the legal document and read it out loud. Emma's folks appeared shocked. My mother's complexion drained of color. I revealed everything. The financial arrangement, the years of control, and how she was ready to wreck my life for money. Then I explained how she had attempted to undermine Sarah's professional life and how far she would go to achieve her goals. By the time I was done, the room erupted. Emma's mother began shouting at my mom, claiming she had destroyed everything. My aunts and uncles were clamoring for explanations. My mom attempted to refute the accusations, but the agreement was right there in plain sight. There was no way out. That was the final time I saw my mother. She rushed out of the meeting, and as far as I'm aware, she hasn't spoken to anyone in the family since. Some family members tried to mediate, suggesting I should try to reconcile, but I'm finished. I dedicated my whole life to making her happy, and it only brought me misery. Regarding Emma, she contacted me a few days afterward to express her gratitude. She told me my mother had been putting pressure on her just as much as hers had pressured me, and now she finally felt liberated. She and her partner are still together, and she's currently working on establishing limits. I'm doing well along with Sarah. She successfully navigated the workplace inquiry, and her school actually retracted the accusations. We've begun to construct a new existence, removed from my mother's control. Things aren't always simple. It's usually difficult to distance yourself from relatives, but now, for the initial time, I genuinely believe I'm in charge of my own existence.